So season 2 of the Forest of Thought podcast has kicked off, and each episode will be an exploration into our ecology of ideas, trying to re-examine the familiar and catch glimpses of the new. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon community member and pledge to give a donation every time we release an episode, which is usually once every 3 to 4 weeks. Any donation, big or small, is much appreciated. Please visit patreon.com/forestofthought for more information. And beyond that, just sharing the podcast with your friends or giving it a good review in your podcast app really helps us to spread the word. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Rieser. What is the true task of an architect? We usually think of architecture as an exclusively human affair. Could we instead learn to create spaces that are more hospitable to both humans and other living beings? It would probably require us to get to know our landscapes and our cityscapes much more intimately. But how do we do that? And what are the hidden teachings in architecture that just can't be talked about? Our guide for this episode is architect Peter Lynch.
The premise of architecture is that underneath every place, and actually every human being, there is something completely mysterious. And that to do justice to occupying the earth and living on earth, you'd have to recognize that, do justice to it.
Peter Lynch is an architect and recently a guest professor at the KTH School of Architecture in Stockholm. He has founded and directed architecture offices in New York, Detroit, Shenzhen, and Beijing, and has decades of experience of teaching architecture students in the United States and in Sweden. We met on a sunny day in May at Peter's summer house in Sörmland, which is a couple hours drive southwest of Stockholm, Sweden. The old traditional Swedish timbered houses were nestled on a south-facing slope with a vegetable garden at one end and an artist's studio belonging to Peter's wife Madeleine Hatz at the other. We sat in the protective shade of a young oak with a view of the lake just visible between the trees. As we began talking, Peter told me about the inspiration he's taken from contemporary Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben, who writes about what it means for something or someone to be singular, to be a singularity. And this has become an important part of Peter's understanding of what architecture's role is. So, a singularity could be described as anyone or anything that's distinguished not for the properties it has or for the categories it belongs to, but for being such as it is in itself. And according to Peter, the best example of a singularity is anyone or any place that you love. I was wondering if you always knew that you wanted to be an architect.
No. Actually, as a kid, I wouldn't tell anybody this, but what I liked doing was taking like bottle caps and leftover bits of this or that and putting them together, or taking things that were made and taking them apart, making diagrams. I thought of myself secretly as an inventor.
Okay.
And what I loved more than anything was untying knots, like when things got really entangled, like your shoelace got super entangled. That, to me, it was super, what do you call it, fulfilling to untangle the knot.
That's so interesting.
And so, or word puzzles, figuring out little slips of paper with letters on them, slipping it around, doing things. So there was this unacknowledged thing that this mind that figures things out, that repairs things, was something I enjoyed. But I didn't make the connection that that's what architects are. So it's only after that I realized, I'm using the same mind that was like moving those little scraps of paper around.
I think that there's an idea about what architects do, which is these sort of masterminds who plan everything out in a way from this drawing board, and as I pictured it. But I kind of wanted to talk to you about, what is architecture actually, or if it's not useful to look for definitions, then what is it that we do when we do architecture?
But I think it's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because architecture, you talk about it as architecture, that means the whole set of everything that's ever been built that is in that category.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Which
it doesn't make sense to generalize,
Yeah.
But to say what is it that one does when one does architecture, that's, I think that one makes, I think you make the fulfillment of the singularity of a place, of a handful of people or family or community or society, and of the materials at hand, that they are all, if you didn't have architecture, then everything would be a problem that could be solved, and it would be, by default, perhaps a general attitude. But the premise of architecture is that underneath every place, and actually every human being, there is something completely mysterious. And that to do justice to occupying the earth and living on earth, you'd have to recognize that, do justice to it.
Could you say something about working with this question of how we both rehabilitate, or not rehabilitate? What would be your word for it? Maybe...
I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, I know that you've talked about how we have sort of wrought destruction on a lot of places as a species, and that's not the whole story, because, like you also point out, humans have also created some of the spaces that have the most biodiversity, for example, at the moment, are these pastures, or old pastures in Sweden, for example, and the spaces in between, the ecotones, the spaces in between spaces. So I don't want to forget that either. But still, there are a lot of places and spaces and landscapes that have suffered because of some not very good ideas, also in terms of architecture.
Yeah.
And so, what is the work that needs to, or how do we go about making those spaces hospitable again, and not just for humans, but for all other life as well? Do you want to say something about that?
Well, it's interesting that you were asking what is the word. That's super interesting because the word points in different directions, like reclaim. This is very, or at least maybe in recent history, a very important word in landscape architecture, because it had a certain what is the word? There's some ethical dimension to reclaiming. Take back, or you could say to. It's so funny. The problem is the word,
Yeah.
So I love what you just said, that some of the most eco-diverse places are ones where human beings have mucked around and they have shifted things around, and that we're not the useless parasites on the planet, actually.
Yeah.
And, like the savannas and many regions of the world, the forest was kept at bay because of humans setting fire or grazing animals. So I like this idea that we try to keep things from is that our job is to keep things from settling.
Keep things from settling.
Settling too quick,
mm-hmm.
too easy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we really were good at that, we would be like incredible, brilliant dinner conversation hosts and hostesses to the green world. Like we would always be setting things in another direction. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's shocking to realize this old idea, this old, premise of the climax state, ecological climax state, is just false.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, that ecosystems don't evolve to a climax state. That's the state before collapse.
Mm-hmm.
You know this. You know what I'm talking about. So, but this was the old idea, the forest grows, the undergrowth is the small trees, then the big trees, and then it reaches its climax. And but actually, that's not the way it is.
Okay.
So, or you could say, biodiversity preserve. We're doing a project now in Norrköping. Oh, we want to believe. We go there, we spread the seeds, maybe we tinker with the water in the soil, and then it's going to do its thing. No, actually, the dominant species will just come back. So once a year, you have to go in there and rip out the equivalent of the quick root, so that the other things can have their place. So wouldn't there be a practice of that? Do you know what I mean? The practice of, putting things in their slightly offset place so that things could emerge.
So, well, can you say something about, because also I think that to be able to build something in a place that allows for that place to be expressing itself most fully, or however we want to put it. The words are always hard to find in this context. But it seems like we need to get to know these places.
Right.
And I guess the usual way of getting to know a place is just spending a lot of time there.
The best.
But what are, for you as an architect, what are some ways that or methods or modes that you use to get to know a place in order to?
Beautiful question. Yeah. It's a methodological question.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Usually you don't have that. Oh God, isn't it interesting? It's like those poor Hollywood composers who are told they have to write this, music in next Friday. And they know they can't do a good job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But God, they are composers. They love composing, so they're gonna do what they can. You know what I mean? So most architects are in that situation.
Yeah.
There's not enough time, but there is an ethical bottom line. People shouldn't get worried. The architect has to visit the place in person. There's nothing else legitimate. Anybody who's boasting that they can do a project like Frank Lloyd Wright did, by mail or by email, that's just bullshit. So, but anyway, so that's the ethical bottom line. You got to go at least once. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, okay, and we know you should be going there many times. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, how do you go there that one time, right? And it's interesting. No one ever asked me this question before. Seems like a student should have asked this question.
Yeah.
Because it has to do with practice. So the people who have thought the most about this and most articulate are within landscape architecture, not architecture. The only writing I've read, maybe it's just because I haven't come across it, that answers your question is in landscape architecture. So like there's a guy, Philippe Girot, who wrote an essay on how do you visit? And he says things that if you do not practice architecture or design, you would think maybe are banal. Because he says things like, the first time is precious. You will, this is the only time, the first time.
It's only you can only see the place for the first time once.
Right. So realize that. And it's not just like a thing you put on a friendly thing on your refrigerator thing, No, it's, so you better prepare. And, it's like we've talked about before. It's a spiritual thing, therefore you cannot say that. You cannot say it in those terms. You better prepare yourself for the first time, because it's it. And the way to prepare yourself is to get rid of your agenda.
Interesting.
You have to not have a solution. Do you know what I mean? Or even that mind. And you have to be attuned. You have to be like those things they call dowsing rods, where you're being dragged by the forked willow towards
That was what
water.
they used. Yeah, what they used to find water.
Yeah, so you have to become a dowsing rod. And, okay, you're asking good questions because this is the heart. If you really want to scratch, why does someone do something? Why did they choose something? That's one question. Why do you keep doing it? That's another question. So why do people keep being architects? It's because of things like this. Because part of your task is to go someplace and become that open, unwritten notebook. And so that's one thing you have to do. And then...
Sorry, to become open.
No, in other words, on tabula rasa, you're like,
right.
that's part of the job.
To become like a blank page.
Yeah, it's part of what you need to enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And then, okay, this is the whole story of how to make a work of architecture.
Yeah.
You go there, you gain things. You do not rush to find a solution. You do not solve things. You spend as much time as you can. It's never enough. Take as many photos as you can. They're all useless. And then if you're a good architect, you talk to random people, you know what I mean? This is all the normal method. It's not really adequate. So I'm working now on a project in Norrköping, this garden. And my partner is a dancer, project partner. And she, as an experimental dancer, when she goes to a place, she enacts, her name's Anna Asplund. She enacts, that's not the right word. She
gathers knowledge?
I don't want to say performs a dance there, but, okay. So anyway, and she structures them as a set of tasks for herself. And so it's super interesting as an architect to be working with someone who's not an architect.
Interesting.
And take shared task of making a design proposal. And so here's what her tasks were. Find the center. I thought, my God, that's what we're doing too as architects. When you go to the place, you immediately, instinctively try to find the center. I'm not talking about the center according to the map, property lines, but what feels like the center of the perceived space. Walk the perimeter. That's exactly what the architect does too. Any good architect. You spend a lot of time, you don't even know why you're doing it, but you prowl. You prowl around. And then there are other tasks, not to take too detailed, but anyway, what turned out that her tasks were formalizations of the unwritten, many of them, unwritten answer to that question, how? That's super interesting. So, but what makes it even more interesting in a way is that as a dancer, she enjoins herself to do that again and again, every time she visits the site. So she's pushing up against that limit of never being able to go there the first time again. And then maybe it's the same as the pianist playing the piece every time as if it was the first time it was played. Do you know what I mean? It's the same. It's part of the performing arts, perhaps, wisdom. So anyway, so that's super interesting, Okay, but I was just going to tell the whole arc, okay, because then the architect goes back to their studio. And sometimes they send the assistant to go measure. And the measuring is extremely important within this unacknowledged spiritual dimension of the métier. That you want to know where everything is exactly to the, hopefully to the half a centimeter. So, by the way, as an architect in this project in Norrköping, that's what I'm doing. I'm measuring everything. Where is this tree? You know, you can't really just look at a map. And where are the contours? Where's the animal paths? You know, what animal? So trying to fix everything onto this drawing is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's parts, you know, you got to skip over in silence of how the design actually arises. But that's maybe too long a thing or too subjective or whatever. But then in the end, what you are doing with your design proposal is going back profoundly. You're going back. You know how I was saying you have to go at least once.
Mm-hmm.
Your design proposal is your promise to go back. Like you say to someone that you met, that you fell in love with, I will see you again. I will visit you again. That's the promise. And that is what the design is. It's your attempt to make good on that promise. And you know what happens? If you did it right, it gets built, and you go back, and you'll start to cry.
Wow.
That's why people keep being architects. Because it's a lousy job otherwise.
And that's happened for you when you've gone back.
I was shocked. When I was the first architect project, every architect begins as an intern for somebody else. So you're riding someone else's knowledge in the beginning. So for me, it was an architect, Stephen Hall. And I was just out of school. I really, truly was not very wise. So I was working on this project, House on Martha's Vineyard. And when we visited for the first time, it was built, I just started to cry. I couldn't believe it was so beautiful. And that, it was better than we thought it would be. How can that be? How does that work? And I know it's not just me. Because it's impossible to reach that point of fulfilling the singularity of a place. It's just too complex. Anybody who has a garden, you know it's infinite labor. Your entire life is not going to be enough. So, or your cabin in the woods, probably you feel every time you go there, you discover something new about it. I don't know if that's true.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's bottomless. So that's what you're up against. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's your task. It's like a Herculean task to fulfill something that is bottomless. And so you need help. You can never do it. Where does that come from? Why is it better than you thought it would be? Even in particular things, like, God, that's brilliant. I'm going to say I meant that. It's interesting. How does that happen? I don't know.
I think that's so interesting what you said about meeting a place for the first time, how you have to cleanse yourself of your ideas about this place or your ideas for how to fix whatever this place and situation is presenting to you, and how, what we should do that more often, just in general.
For sure.
If we were meeting a new person.
Oh, yeah. Or
anything, just to be in this, what you call maybe the dowser mode, to be, and I also made me think of these the builders and the architects and the landscape architects sort of ancient times, but whether in the East or the West or whatever, that this question of where to lay the founding stone of the city.
Yeah.
Or where to build the temple.
Right.
This knowledge, this particular knowledge that that's been forgotten, but that, clearly if you are doing architecture right, then maybe you're in this.
Right.
The continuation of that tradition.
I don't think it's forgotten.
No, it's not forgotten. Okay. It's just not talked about.
It's just not talked about. But, it's interesting. This is maybe a tangent, but a super interesting one. If something is rediscovered by someone, by themselves, not because they were part of a tradition or they had a certain teacher or they read the right books, they have invented it. In fact, do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
That's a pretty marvelous way to keep knowledge alive, to let it, to take that risk, rather than package it and hand it down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, interesting.
And I think that the most wise aspects of architecture education, there's no question, they're the things that are not packaged and delivered and talked about.
Right.
We talked about this before also, but there are other things you should not talk about. And that's not kind of like not saying the name of God. No, I don't mean it like that. I mean we're not even going to pretend that it exists. And then, my God, when I started crying, I will never forget that. Do you think a teacher needed to tell me that? Thank God nobody told me that. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, they could have. I wouldn't have paid attention. But anyway, I think things are protected. The wise things are protected. And things can be rediscovered, constantly rediscovered. And that's the real living knowledge. And I don't think we're that far away from that. Because yes, isn't it incredible? The very thing that's the most important thing the architect does is still founding the place for the stone. It's still the same exact thing.
That's the most important.
No question.
Okay. Do you want to say something about this project that you're doing for the Biennale in Venice?
Yeah. Well, it's this garden in Norrköping.
Right.
So what I'm doing, first, I asked a group of people, a set of people to work with me. A dancer, who I mentioned, urban planner, Martin Hedesche, who's working in Norrköping, and a data scientist in KTH, Mats Nordahl. And it's a project about method, in a way. In other words, like we were saying about what is it to make a design proposal? What is it? How do you begin? How do you continue? That's really what it's about. So who is it for? Do you know what I mean? What can you offer? What is needed? All these questions. So there's this scrap of land in Norrköping that's super interesting. I've been going there since 2017. It's a little bluff. It's a little rocky hill that's sticking up in the middle of this more or less flat part of Norrköping, surrounded by industry, and it's been left to its own devices. So it's kind of a park, but people just go there maybe now and then, 5 people a day max, but it's in the middle of the city. So it has a lot going for it vis-a-vis what we were talking about before. It is clearly a singular place on Earth. It's not a generic lot in the city. And it's got this incredible traces of something happened here. You know, things happened. There were summer houses. There was an exhibition here. Things happened here, and now it's kind of just forgotten. So what we wanted to do is find a method where we would know how to act in this place, to bring it up, to make it more hospitable, but not just for human beings. And this is something a lot of people are talking about in architecture now. So, but what does that really mean? That's, hopefully there'll be more and more critical talk about that, because what does it mean as an architect to care for non-human beings, you know, like, anyway, so I could talk a lot. It'd probably get boring quickly, because there's a normal way to think about that, which is to provide services, or you'll create situations where things, you know, like this is good for so-and-so, and these creatures will enjoy that, and we're going to just do this, and
like
basta.
Did you say a cat hotel? That's like
yeah, God. So we didn't want to do that, because what really is going on is, first, these old problems, you know, the problems contemporaneous with civilization and agriculture, that human beings are becoming more and more the dominant monopolistic presence. So we can deal with that if we make a garden that has more diversity, that can provide habitat. But for who, you know? Are we going to go through the manual and just say, oh, you know, well, you know, this should be a good place for so-and-so? Or do we want to find out who is living there? What is going on there? You know, it would be the way that you approach human so-called clients, you know. So what we realized, the first problem is that they're not visible. The actual life of the world is not visible to most people.
Interesting.
They don't see, first off, it's back to what we said, you have to go there many times. If you visit a place like the cabin in the mountains over the whole year, then you see the whole thing. You get the whole story. Otherwise, it's like reading a novel with chapters ripped out. You're not going to get it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. How do you deal with that fact that the attention of most people is limited and sporadic and distracted? So, but the problem is them. The problem isn't just to make a home for creatures who would benefit, you know, but it's to change the attention of people. And how do you do that? So this is super interesting and a big question, and we definitely did not answer the question. But one thing we thought is, it's about visibility. The things that are going on there have to be made visible. They have to be brought up. Now, traditionally, this is through aesthetics, like the design of a Japanese garden or a Pete Udolph perennial garden is bringing up, it's increasing the saturation of that which would have occurred, to the point where it becomes visible to us in our state of, you know, torpor. And so that's somewhat familiar. That's an aesthetic question. How can we make this into a beautiful place? But we need to know what's going on. Who's living there? What's unfolding there?
We as in the people who are responsible for the project?
Yes. Exactly. So we kind of went to the dark side in this appearance of it. We set up 2 surveillance cameras for this place. And one camera is pretty close field of view, the other is a distant field of view. And every rabbit, every bird that passes the field of view is registered, and then Mats converts it into a tracing through an algorithm. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the exact movement of that. It could be a leaf. It doesn't even have to be a being. And so we can have all of the birds in this place in 1 year on one drawing. You know what I mean?
See the movements.
We can see the whole thing, and it's like testimony. because it's like it's truth, like almost like a signature. Like you see somebody's signature, this old idea that you can tell something about their character. Well, the movement of that being is saying something. And then the other thing is we change our attention and we look at all the paths that are engraved in the ground, through the bushes, where all these animals are going. They're moving, they're roaming, they're doing their thing. And they are doing it with a desire. They have a desire. That's why they're going from here to there. And so when we see all these tracings, even if we can't understand what that desire is, we know, we can see from the signature of the line that there's a desire. And so there's a lot of interesting things about that that you discover when you start to look at the paths, like the animal paths. And so what we want to do is bring up in visibility again these paths. Because to walk the animal path is to begin to get some kind of embodied understanding of that mind. And so where are the paths going? Like one path leads to this rock outcropping. And we found a lot of bird feathers there. So somebody likes to eat their birds at that rock outcropping. Well, it's a really nice place to hang out. Isn't that interesting? Like there's a lot of beer bottles there too. So we're trying to read the place. Now, the advantage of our method is that we're spending a lot of time, and we'll end up collectively going there countless times. So it's going to be a different kind of project, than the normal one where you're already apologizing in advance. So will it be beautiful? Will it be good? Will it be built? We don't know, But we definitely are trying to stay true to it. So, and then there's a question, what do we do for the Biennale? Do you know what I mean? Like, because the garden, if it is done, it won't be done by October. So we're going to present the drawings of all the paths.
Okay.
The drawings of the dancer's path. I told you the dancer's performing a dance on the site. That's if the dancer is able to enact a knowledge of the place, then that should be visible in the drawing. Like that drawing should be somehow testimony, I think. So we'll present those drawings, and then I'm making block prints, multi-layer linoleum block prints, like the Japanese kind of technique of multiple colors. And, it's a totally ridiculous idea because it's not very efficient, it's not very precise, but the act of carving it is like making the paths, like the way the humans and non-humans have made the paths is the same as the act of carving that thing. And so, and also, there's many other reasons why I think a good method. So we'll have, and then we invented this method of capturing the gestures of the dancer. So what we've done, we found a way to make the images capture the movement or gestures like a ghost. So the dancer's figure becomes like a ghostly envelope that captures that dance. So if in that gesture the act is being soil or being tree or being sky, then we can look at that ghost cloud and we can just offer it up as criteria. Is that being cloud? Is that being earth? So we're going to put together all these different kinds of testimony. We'll see. I mean, obviously, I like talking about this.
I think it's really interesting because I think that we although we have this idea that we need to go and to get to know a place, we need to go and meditate there on a rock or something for a long time, and that's a great method, obviously. But it's nice to think of these other methods that that provide something else that is not necessarily worse. It's just different, and it's a different. It's has a quality to it that's different, but it's still a dedicated attention.
Exactly.
Which is maybe the main point.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's no shortcut. That's kind of the bottom line. When we entered this project, I thought, God, press a button. We're going to get all of the paths of all of the birds through this place. Mm-hmm. God, so efficient. Mm-hmm. It's the opposite. It's taken so much longer to get this thing that we might as well have just been pitching a tent there. And, do you know what I mean? And like,
that's true.
It's like it totally backfired.
Interesting.
It's like, so if we're writing about it, we say, best plus.
Yeah.
Press and play, But in truth, you can't escape this fact that you actually have to. It's inevitable. You're going to have to spend a lot of time. And meditating on a rock ends up to be pretty efficient.
That's really wonderful, actually. That's good to know.
Well, not caring at all is the most so-called efficient of all. That's the problem.
Exactly. I guess that's a popular method as well. What do you think? What's the sort of? Could you say something about some? What's? I don't want to put it this bluntly, but what's the problem with architecture today? What's architecture's biggest problem?
It's obsolete. It's useless.
Okay, in what way?
Oh. What's needed in the eyes of the building industry is not an architect. God, that's like a dentist applying to be the university president. They probably could do a good job, but they're not what's wanted. They don't have the... We're being trained according to a tradition that doesn't match the actual reality. And Sweden is a very good example of this, like historical moment when it dawned on everyone that they don't need architects. It's with what they call the miljonprogrammet. They had to build 1 million housing units. So they went to the architects. The architects did great, beautiful projects, but they were slow because they actually had to think about what they were doing. And they were going to make the work for that site, for that place. Too slow. They could not do it. They were brushed aside. And what's happened since then in Sweden is very telling. Architects are deprofessionalized, right? Anyone can call themselves an architect. And they are not the ones who take any legal responsibility. That means they actually have no responsibility. Like if you don't take responsibility, you don't have responsibility. So at least in Sweden, which I think is not an exception, I think it's just a more pure example of the reality of this time. There's no need for architects. They don't want architects. And then look around and see the result. The result is a kind of zombie urbanism. You know what I mean? Like places built that are just hollow shells of places. You know what I mean? Like, God.
So that's why everything looks so awful. I didn't realize that was...
That's because...
there's no architects involved.
No, the architects are involved, but they're basically put in a little room with one little light bulb hanging over their heads and given 5 minutes and told to do something. They're not needed within the process. They're absolutely needed in terms of actually fulfilling the need, the true deepest need. But they're not needed in terms of the workflow. So they do things like they design the facade, or they design the shape of the building, because that's what they can control. And by the way, there are very good architects. Anybody who's hearing this is going to get pissed off because there are really good architects, but they're all swimming upstream. They're all going against this reality. And then there's these tiny little countries like Switzerland, Portugal, where the architects are still practicing this other way. So Sweden has this weird honor of being a tiny country that's actually thinking like a big country, in terms of building production.
But that seems to be a problem of the rest of the world, not architecture itself. Or I mean, seems like it's a societal problem.
Right, right, it is.
More than a problem within architecture.
And it's baked in, because, for instance, if you told a client that you wanted to do this for them, but it would cost more, the architect isn't saying that because of some kind of, bling attraction. It does cost more. It will be slower. It will take he or she more time. That's the truth. To think anything else is just magical thinking. But the client says no. Or the client splits the difference. Where does that come from? Do you know what I mean? Like, if there's no sense of what is needed, how can you decide that, well, maybe we'll give you a little more? So it's baked in that sense that the problem is not the big building companies and the real estate brokers and the, image market. It's a general lack of preciousness of people towards their own life and their own place on earth, and their commercialized attitude that's so deeply baked in, And so what would it take to change that, We always started talking about the idea of singularity, or not the idea of, but the fact of, that everything rests on its irremediable, unremediable completeness and idiosyncrasy, or whatever. The words are very important. So a lot of these thoughts were brought up reading this book, Giorgio Agamben book, The Coming Community.
Okay.
And I think he's part of a philosophical tradition that uses this word, singularity. But it was super helpful for me vis-a-vis architecture. Because actually, you asked me what is it to make architecture? And I was saying, well, it's basically to recognize singularities and bring up to make hospitable a world of singularity. But it's not what's understood as the role of architecture. Because, we spent some time talking about one of the pitfalls, which is the generic. The generic has nothing to do with singularity. Like to talk about a typology, prototype, or a solution, or a product, you know what I mean? Architects speak of their buildings as products. That's one path. The other path is idiosyncrasy. Like, we're going to make the coolest thing, and it's going to be ours, and it's going to look like ours, and so boring, so bogus. But you look through the architecture websites, and that is what many architects think their job is, to make not singularities, but idiosyncrasies, to call attention to their individuality. So this is interesting, because this is maybe the most interesting thing to try to get at. What attitude of mind, what kind of spirit would allow or encourage one to work in this way of bringing up the singular? So here's another way to talk about it. Before, when we were talking about architecture, I was saying that every work of architecture is an example. It's a way, it represents itself as a way of doing something. It's kind of like, it is what it is, and it is about what it is. By the way, this is not a new idea. But what I would want to add to that is, it's effortlessly about what it is, not dogmatically or didactically about what it is. the thing I'm trying to get at, like this idea of grace. Because the moments that architecture still exists as a profession, as a practice, human endeavor, is when people are struck by it. Someone visits something, they're in the presence of something, and they are moved. Then there is still architecture. That's given. So what I was trying to say is that they're moved by not only that it is what it is so beautifully, but that it is offering something. It is about, not about, it is making possible something for that person. So that's the thing. It's not didactic,
And that's what architecture is when it really is architecture.
Well, I mean, there's so many ways of talking about things. I think maybe it's not true, but maybe only partially true. But when I think about architecture or works that are the highest example of emotional intensity for me, it's, for instance, Japanese architecture, Chinese gardens, South Chinese gardens, Japanese gardens. When you're in the presence of those things, or I'm just speaking for myself, you're it's the reaction has to be something like, I didn't know it could be so beautiful, or I had no idea it could be so perfect, or you realize that you have crossed some kind of boundary that you didn't know existed. And I do think, I was saying before, the architects, maybe in some cases, they're not as articulate as the landscape architects. And I do think that architecture is a subcategory of landscape architecture. And what we are doing is conceptualized very well as a garden, whatever it is. Like the garden, this idea of this encounter with wonder, like, oh my God, this is incredible, this is beautiful. I associate it first with gardens, and I wonder if it's just not, maybe it's not just me, like, and then we get this whiff of something, you know what I mean? Like this old idea, for us, the Garden of Eden idea, like this whiff. And that the world is perfect. It's much nicer to think about that, no? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Amazing that you're doing this.
Thank you. Is it an oak?
Tree. It's an oak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Kept us in shade.
Yeah.
You can find links, suggested readings, and lectures from Peter in the show notes or on our website, which is forestofthought.com. A special thank you to our Patreon supporters for helping to make this podcast possible. Our wonderful theme music is by Christian Holtsten at stoneproduction.no. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take care.